in this lesson, I want to talk to you about something that happens to a lot of trauma survivors, but we don't think about it. Nobody really talks to us about it, but it's something that happens, and it tends to really disrupt our lives if we don't do something about it. And that is the impact of long-term stress and burnout. We already talked in the last lesson about the reality that if you've had PTSD, childhood trauma, then our ability to, and I say ours because I came from that same place, our ability to bounce back from stress is more difficult than what other people are able to do. So I want to really go through with you what the long-term impact is. You've probably heard about the ACEs study. I'm not going to talk about that study today, but I am going to talk about something else that's going to be really informative and help you understand what you need to do to pull things back to start healing your body. Because we really can't start working on trauma triggers. We can't really start healing ourselves from PTSD until our body is feeling safe and until we're starting to feel well. If we're not well physically, or if we don't feel safe, and what I'm going to talk to you about today is what happens to us when we get a long-term stress where our body isn't feeling safe for a very long time. We can't heal trauma in that space because we have to be able to pay really close attention to what's happening in our body. And if all we're getting is stress signals and illness and exhaustion, we aren't going to be able to heal the trauma. So this is Cellier's Generalized Adaptation Syndrome. So if you look here, this is resistance. This is resistance to stress over time. So when you look at this line, you'll see in the beginning when something stressful happens to us across time. So if you think about days and weeks and years, we have a pretty good level of resistance. But then at this point right here, something happens. And when that something happens, whether it's stress, childhood stress, or a big major event, what happens is our body goes into this alarm stage. In the alarm stage, just at the beginning, we have a reduction of resistance to the stress. And then further on in the alarm stage, we develop, that's kind of when we think about people who've been through childhood trauma and have CPTSD, we have this ability to really stay on alert, stay alarmed, stay aware and awake and paying attention to things in our environment. And our resistance goes higher as the stress is staying there. But over time, in this resistance stage, we have the highest peak of resistance here. And then you see over time, our resistance starts to go down. Then, once we get to that exhaustion stage, and there's this critical point in time where once the exhaustion state kicks in, you can see here now the resistance to stress is getting lower and lower and lower. And when that happens, we're going to just click into that time. In that exhaustion stage, there are things that happen to us on a health level. So we don't have any energy left to deal with stress when we get to this point in time. We also have all of our, I don't know if you felt it before, you probably have, but that emotional, mental, physical energy that we have is completely spent. Then we'll experience depression and anxiety, and we'll have a breakdown in our immune system, which means basically that we'll get sick. So the first time I got into this stage, if we look back over here, I had a lot of childhood trauma. I was going to, when I was in my 30s, I was going to graduate school. I graduated when I was 30, so in my late 20s, and adopted a baby who had very strong special needs. She actually heard her first voices when she was 4 years old. And so in the summer between my first and second years of graduate school, I bring home this baby who ends up needing a lot of care. She would choke on in the orphanage, they didn't teach her how to chew. They fed the baby so fast that they never learned how to chew. And so I found myself in that summer, like sitting next to her all the time while she was eating, and got really, really good at just ripping her out of the high chair and turning a almost 3-year-old over. She's 2.5 when she came home, and doing like emergency first aid to stop her from choking because she wouldn't chew. So along this time, I'm also going to go into my second year of graduate school. I have to pay attention to the hours I'm spending with clients. I have to pay attention to getting my schoolwork done. And I have this little one who has like so many special needs that I can't leave her alone. So that's the alarm. Over the course of that year, I actually got sicker and sicker. For me, it was like holding my stress right here in my shoulder. So I ended up with some tremendous pain and chronic headaches. And then by the time I got out of graduate school, I was literally unable to get out of bed, emotionally, mentally, physically spent. I had no energy. I even had suicidal thoughts, and I was sick. Took me some time to get over that. And that's the thing that you have to understand, is that once you've gotten to this exhaustion stage, it's hard to come back because all of your systems are shutting down. It really is the danger zone. So once you've been there, I've been there twice in my life. And the thing of it is that once you've been there, it's easier to go there again. And it's harder to recover each time. And there's always an exacerbation of health risks every time you go there. So most of us know, we can tell when we're in this stage or when we've been in this stage. And most of the time, because people don't talk about it, what I've seen is that when I introduce this to people, they're shocked and surprised that there's actually a description for something like this. And then discovering that it's a real thing, and discovering that once you've been there, you have to be careful about not going back again. It really is a surprise to many people, but it's a real thing. And so if you've been there, if this is something that's happened to you in your life, what I want you to know is that it's going to be really important that you have to return to a recovery state, right? So you have to go back to a place where you actually can get a little bit better at resisting stress than what you did before you got over here to the exhaustion stage. So, and I've said this already, you can't heal your triggers when you're in alarm, resistant, or exhaustion stages. So if we go back over here, when you're here, when you're in all of these stages, this is why I've said that to be a member of this group, you can't be in an actively violent relationship. Because when you're in an active, stress, violent relationship, you're always in this state. And when you're always in this state, it's impossible to heal. So if our body has gone there because of the chronic stress that we've been under, and because of what it has done to us, then it's really important to get to a recovery state. And you have to think, I tell my clients this, I think about it this way when I have been there myself. I haven't been there for decades, fortunately. But you have to think of yourself as if you're in recovery, right? When you go to the hospital and you're staying in the intensive care unit, everything is about getting you back on your feet and getting you back healed again and getting you to the place where you can actually function at a minimal level to get out of the intensive care unit. And that's what you have to do to be able to get yourself out of the exhaustion stage so that you can heal trauma. It's a requirement. So what do? What does that look like? It really requires a holistic approach. If you've been in the exhaustion stage, you really have to say, okay, I need to be doing something dramatic. Hopefully you'll get that here at Trauma Free Nation with this support and the help that I'm offering you, but you have to do something dramatic. You have to be thinking about putting yourself first. So many people that I've talked to who get to that exhaustion stage, if we've had childhood trauma, we can stop paying attention to our own needs. It's one of the things, the messages that we take, right? If I'm so focused on my environment and what somebody around me is going to do, I'm not going to be focused on my own needs. And one of the ways that that manifests itself, for example, is think about this. How long do you hold your pee? Most people who've experienced childhood trauma can go hours and hours and hours and hours without ever thinking about going to the bathroom, right? Or they can make sure that everybody else around them is okay before they make sure that they're okay. And what I'm telling you is, at this stage, if you have been at exhaustion, or if you're at exhaustion now, your mindset really has to be, I have to make sure that I'm okay first. And if that involves saying, my healing, my ability to heal my trauma, my ability to take my life back, all of those things right now depends on me caring for me, and you giving yourself permission to do that, that's what you have to do. And mindset in the permission to heal bundle that I offer as a bonus for being part of this group, you should receive that as a bonus. If you haven't received that as a bonus and you find yourself in this exhaustion state and you need mindset help, then reach out and let me know that, and I'll make sure that you get that bonus in your hands. The other thing is sleep. Sleep is very restorative and it helps us heal. Now, sometimes when we've had trauma, sleep can be a very difficult thing for us to do. And it's one of the habits that gets negative impact, because if we've had trauma, sleep is disruptive. I know that I've had periods of time in my life where I couldn't sleep because it didn't serve me well to shut my body and mind down instead of watching for danger. But even if you have to take little naps, or even if you lay down and listen to something to get you out of your thoughts and rest, whenever your body says you need to rest. That's what the holistic approach is. Also, hydration. So how much water do you drink? If you can go all day without peeing, you also can go a really long time without paying attention or noticing that you're thirsty. And our body, we can't get toxins out of our body if we aren't drinking water. So these are some of the basics I want you to be looking at. Quality food. The best way to eat, and my own bias about helping us heal completely, is 100% whole organic foods, which means nothing processed. So foods that have sugar, foods that have processed wheat, foods that have a long list of ingredients, foods that are made with flours that are not natural flours, so like enriched wheat flour or enriched white flour, packaged and processed foods can actually create a process in our body where we're actually in fight-flight because of what we eat. We can have foods that our body recognizes and that our body can use easily to help us heal, or we can eat foods that actually add to inflammation. And our nervous system, our belly is connected to our brain. If you want a really good book about how to work on and heal your body using quality food and why it's important, I would recommend the book called A Mind of Your Own by Dr. Kelly Brogan. She's a psychiatrist who helps people heal their major mental health issues using food. She actually says don't use medication. I'm not going to go that far at this point because I'm not a doctor, but quality food makes a difference. And then finally, supplementation. So supplements, I would say many of them, there are stories that you can hear that like the plain multiple vitamins that you can buy, the 1 a day plus iron. I don't know if that's one of them or not, but they can go through us largely undigested. So I think for supplementation, it's good to find a standard process, and I'm not affiliated with them. I just know that they're good supplement company. Practitioner who actually uses standard process to help you supplement, a good naturopathic doctor. So a doctor who doesn't use traditional medication, but uses more natural, holistic to help your body get to a place where you actually can heal and your body can take over its physical healing process with support, but not in a way that I am biased against pharmaceuticals because I think they make us sick. But that's part of my own process of healing my body and mind and emotions and recovering and completely healing PTSD. But it's part of the holistic approach that I recommend if you're really serious about getting yourself away from that exhaustion stage and never going back. When I first started, well, I will say that when I made the major turn around the corner that made it super clear that my PTSD was healed, and when I got to the point where I was not having triggers daily, and that when I did have a trigger occasionally, I could recognize it coming up in my body. It didn't cause a disruption. I was able to focus and experience things in the moment in a joyful way much more than I had before. That happened after I spent an entire year napping every day. And so I want you to see that, it takes a long time for us to get to the point where our health suffers from exhaustion because we're dealing mentally and emotionally with all the impact of trauma. And we have to, as much as we can control it, control our environment and what we're doing in our environment to heal our bodies. We heal our bodies, we get our bodies to calm down, which is very essential before we can start healing trauma. That lays the groundwork. Then we can start to intentionally relax our body when a trigger happens so that we can actually start pulling it apart. We'll be talking about that in later modules, but I just wanted to tell you. So this holistic approach really is requiring you to give yourself permission to take care of yourself. You have to choose that health for you is going to be number one. It has to be your first priority. And if you have kids or you have people in your life who are maybe not supportive of this process, then you have to look for that. You have to look for the help because you only have one life. And if you want to really heal, you have to put your number one priority on your health. Secondly, I want you to be thinking about these changes as permanent changes. They're foundational, they're super essential and important for your overall healing process. And if they're not permanent change, then this process, so the process of healing trauma is like a progressive process and it has building blocks. And as you lay your foundation by saying, okay, I'm going to heal my body, I'm going to treat my body in the way the most empathetic, the most caring, the most thoughtful way I know how. I'm going to do that. I'm going to learn how to do that. And then I'm going to add the building blocks of learning how to heal triggers. I'm going to add the building blocks of learning how to deal with the impact of the trauma in my life. That's not a trigger. I'm going to learn how to do that. I'm going to build all of that up. But we have to think about it as permanent change. I recently watched a video of someone who, and I'm 54, and my life is finally on the track I want it to be. It took a long time because a lot of what I learned was by trial and error. I didn't I didn't find satisfactory help with the therapist, which is true for a lot of chronic PTSD, childhood trauma survivors. And so it's taken me a long time to put these things together. And being able to do that and slowly, gradually add one thing on top of another and create permanent change is the only way to make this happen. I had watched a video a couple of nights ago from a woman who had just turned 52 or about to turn 52. And she was talking about all of the impact in her life of trauma and not being able to support herself and not being able to focus on her dreams and not being able to live out the dreams that she had created because of the chaos that trauma creates in the head, in the mind, in the body. And it just broke my heart. It simply broke my heart. So somebody needs to be saying, look, let's make a foundation. Let's create some permanent changes. Let's start with the body and build from there. The reason I also put here ask for help is because you have a community now. You have people around you in Trauma Free Nation who are willing to help you think through and problem solve through how to make sure that you can take care of yourself and put yourself number one. And so ask for help. Come to the weekly Q&As and ask for help on something that you feel stuck on. Your ability to give yourself permission is all about what you say to yourself about it. There may be people in your life who don't like that idea. I remember my first abusive relationship. I was trying very, very hard to do this. So when I was in graduate school, adopting the child, that was a very abusive relationship, and I was trying very hard to pull myself back physically from where I was in that space and time. And I said, at one point in time, I said, I'm just really trying to learn how to take care of myself. And he said, you take care of yourself better than anybody I know. And it was very an interesting statement because he was complaining. He was suggesting that my taking care of myself was a selfish thing to do. And there is a tangle of thoughts and habits that go with not giving ourselves permission because somebody else doesn't. And I want to give you the courage to process through that and do whatever you need to do to put your self-care first. And then secondly, on this slide, I'm talking about slow down. So we can always take moments. When we have had trauma in our life, PTSD, we run. And I'm not talking literally run, but we run. We have this attitude of constantly running and constantly going like we're running away from something. Sometimes it's because there's too much noise on the inside. So we run to keep that quiet enough so that we can function in life. But the cost of that is the physical exhaustion, the emotional exhaustion, the immune system exhaustion. So I want to encourage you to slow down. And again, if that's hard, if it makes you feel stuck, then come to the group and talk about it. Come to the Q&A and talk about it. Share that in the community because there are other people experiencing the same thing. You're not doing this alone, and there are ways to think through and around it, and we can do that together. This part is stop being a people pleaser has everything to do with what I was just talking to you about. You got to learn how to say no. And when I say breaking interpersonal habits, I'm talking about the habits that we have inside of ourselves about what we think we have to do to please other people. Putting yourself first means learning how to say no. It means maybe disappointing someone or having them being upset. It means letting that happen because you got to take care of you. It means setting boundaries with people. It means recognizing when, so for example, lots of moms who've had chronic trauma don't sit down to eat until everybody else at the table has eaten. I'm talking about saying, I'm going to eat too. I'm going to sit down at the table with you, and I'm going to eat with you. These are little things, but they're not little things when you do them. They feel like big things. They feel like putting your own needs first, right? So, and we'll be talking about needs in a later lesson, but I want you to start thinking about what this kind of change is going to require for you. So setting a boundary of, I'm going to eat with you. When somebody drops their spoon on the floor, you're not the one who jumps up to get the spoon. You learn how to say, whoops, you dropped your spoon. Okay, go grab a new one, right? Where that's a boundary. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm not going to jump up from the table because I'm eating here and that's important, right? It's how you talk to yourself that helps you recognize the priority you need to put on you. And I recognize that without telling you, without giving you the other steps, that this right now is contrast into what your trauma training is saying. But what I want you to start thinking about is, what are the automatic behaviors that you've always done because you've always felt like you've had to, or you've always felt like you're doing that to keep you safe, and you never really thought about it. I'm asking you to start thinking about some of those things. And if you can't think about some of those things, I want you to really just ask yourself, how long do you hold your pee? And then just make a commitment to yourself to pee when you need to pee. Like, and it might sound funny, but those are things that we neglect when we've had long-term trauma because we've disconnected from our body and from our own needs. So part of the holistic approach, especially if you've gotten to that exhaustion state, is to start to tune in and go, okay, what does my body need? Am I hungry? Have I had anything to drink today? Do I need to pee? It's that basic. So part of, I know this seems like a lot of work, but part of getting through and keeping you moving forward is really looking at what has it cost you to this point in time to not make these changes. I know it seems like a lot of work. I know that it can be intimidating, but the thing I want you to understand is that you only need to make one little change at a time. Instead of focusing on what's going on around you, make some focus toward what is it that I need. And I'm not talking about the focus that you make toward yourself when you feel overwhelmed or when you feel like you're in a trigger. I'm talking about waking up in the morning and going, what do I need first? Let me grab some breakfast and get some water. Like basic asking yourself, what do I need to care for myself? Okay? One change at a time. In our next lesson, we're going to talk about how your behaviors reinforce your stress and PTSD response over time. So we're going to extend this lesson to help you really understand how those habits get reinforced. To change them, we need to understand them. And so we'll be talking about that in the next lesson. So we'll see you there. That's the next place to go from here.